Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Grace Parents Podcast. I am so excited about today's episode. We're talking about motherhood. That's right, moms, this one's for you. So tune in, listen well, as we present a special edition for our mothers. Hey, welcome back to the Grace Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Anika. And while we'll miss him, Pastor AJ is not with us today because we're going to be talking about motherhood. But I'm not alone. I'm very excited for my two special guests, Michele and Shekea, are joining me today. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Oh, please tell our viewers or listeners all about your family, your kids. Go ahead, Shekea. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So I am a mom of two. My oldest is 10 and my youngest is 7.5. Marcos and I have been married for almost 13 years.
Wow. Love it.
Living and loving this life. Yeah.
Amazing.
I am a mom of 3 boys, like you, Anika.
Moms.
My boys are a little younger. My oldest just turned 8. Levi will be 6 in a couple weeks. And then Judah is 3. And AJ and I will be celebrating 15 years in June.
I love this.
Yeah.
We all have our hands full with our beautiful blessings and our wonderful husbands. I've shared before, but I'll share today. I am a mom of 3 boys. My oldest is 18 years old.
What?
Getting ready to go away to college. I have an almost 16-year-old and an almost 14-year-old. We have 2 birthdays coming up. So getting ready for all the celebrations, the graduation parties, and as usual, like you, having my hands full.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about our special Mother's Day episode today, that we're going to be able to take the time and just talk about the many different nuances of motherhood. We're doing a little something different as well today because we were able to take the opportunity to survey our community of moms and just ask them, do you have any questions that you would love for us to just pose and share our life experiences on? And so we got quite a few questions. And so we'll do that towards the latter half. But as I've been thinking about us meeting today, I've just been reflecting on my own journey of motherhood. And it just brought me back to the beginning. I'm a book reader. I love to search the internet. And so when I was prepping for our firstborn, that's what I did. I went to the internet looking up all the things, all the milestones, the things I should prepare. I had way too many books, like the really thick ones too, that I never even can get to.
The tiny script.
Exactly. And I remember my husband was like, okay, we have a library. I said, we have to get ready. Like nobody gives me a handbook. I don't want to make a mistake with a whole human being.
Right.
And so it just reminded me though how I was relying quite substantially on my own head knowledge, and those around me that I can pick their brains. And back then I didn't think about this, but now I was able to recognize how I didn't think about, okay, Lord, what would you have me do? Like I grew up in the church. Always been in a relationship with the Lord. And so I just thought how funny it was, like looking back, I would tell myself, you probably should have started like there, like biblically, like, how do I do this, Lord? Or like, what is your purpose and what is your call biblically for my walk in motherhood? So I thought it'd be great for us to start there and just asking both of you, like, as you reflect and think on your journey, your experiences, what would you hone in would be the biblical call of motherhood?
No, that's good. When I think about motherhood, very similar to you, like I think about, it's about stewardship, right? It's about taking care of the little people that have been entrusted to you in love, keeping them alive, and thinking about cultivating your relationship with them.
Right.
Then when you think about the biblical aspect, like I'm sitting back and thinking, to your point, I should probably be doing a little bit more than this. Like I think God is the one that's called me to steward. Is thinking about, it's all of those things that motherhood is, but it's the additional layer and priority of cultivating their relationship with him.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what God has been speaking to me since my kids have been around.
That's so good. I think my first ministry is my boys, my family.
Right.
And so very similarly to Shekea, I think the heart is that in our word and our deed and our behavior, the way we live our lives, that they would be able to see the love of God in us and see that as something that they would want for themselves. And then I think our heart too is just that they would be able to know who they are and whose they are in Jesus.
Amen.
So that when they are out in the world or when they're not in our home anymore, that's they know that.
Right,
That's a truth that they can hang on to. That's kind of the hope, I think.
There's a quote that just reminded me of that I read a few years ago that has stuck with me, and it talked about parenting and specifically mothering being an answer to your child's silent request to get to know God all by themselves. So you think about layering that on top of everything that you do, and them knowing God is really first knowing and experiencing Jesus. So I think we have to look at our motherhood and saying that is our responsibility to cultivate his presence, to cultivate experiencing him. And what is that? I feel like that equals discipleship. So I think that's really the biblical call.
I love that. I love that. The stewarding, the discipling, the pouring in, the teaching, the nurturing are foundational in that call. One thing I also thought about is the positioning. Like God doesn't make mistakes when he positions us to mother the children he's given us to mother. And I also thought, in addition to our own biological children, that goes for children you adopt, that goes for your spiritual children. There's a call on women as mothers to answer, not answer, but be ready for how God positions us. Because what you do for your children, even your own spiritual children that you may have one day, is only something you can do, Shekea. And only something you can do, Michelle. And so like God hasn't made any mistakes. And he continues to equip us in that journey and in that process. And so I just thought about just encouraging our mothers to, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's tiring, but embrace the call, embrace the positioning, and also making sure we're not doing it by our own strength. Because the burnout is real. The hours, there's no days off.
No days off.
There's no vacation.
Trying to clock in for overtime.
It just doesn't happen. It's like, no. So I wanted to just share, as I was reading this week, I found this quote. It says, motherhood, it is sanctifying, but it is also so sweet. And I was like, oh, that sanctification part, Jesus. It is so sanctifying because it made me think about the need to not react to the moments of my mothering and the call to respond in the spirit. I am not perfect or good at that, but I know I try to be intentional at times, or like I'm quick to apologize to my boys. Let's reset.
Which is teaching in and of itself, right?
It is. It is, because we're modeling, like when you're in the midst of conflict, like it doesn't mean go off the handle. It doesn't mean like silent treatment, or just even like just sit in your room by yourself until I'm ready. Because I remember when that used to happen to me as a kid. I would be scared waiting for my mother to come. What am I waiting for?
It's happened in my house. And I just say, sorry.
Different things. We all do it differently. But back to that sanctifying part, just grateful that God has helped me to harness that self-control and to respond and love more. And then the sweet part of that quote, I always tell my boys, you guys are my heartbeats. And so even though it's a lot and it's there's burnout at times that I've experienced personally, I would never want to just acknowledge the beauty and the sweetness of being a mom. But in thinking about the sanctifying and how if we're not leaning on the Lord in our mothering, it also brought me to our next section that I wanted us to talk about, was how do we maintain ourselves, that mom life balance, that mom life work balance too. Like, there's working moms, there's moms that are home, there's moms that are homeschooling. Like, how do we maintain a balance for ourselves?
The first thing that kind of came to mind was just acknowledging that there are going to be seasons. So, like when the babies are like their babies, there's going to be seasons where like that's potentially all that you can do.
Right.
And that I think kind of acknowledging that can sort of help with how challenging that can be. Like knowing that there are going to be times where maybe I will be able to go back to work, or I will be able to volunteer more, or like whatever it is that your heart is.
Right.
Just kind of giving yourself that grace to know like this is a season of my life where this is where I have to prioritize things differently than normal. So yeah, that was kind of my thought on it.
I love that too, that you mentioning that, because as you were talking, what popped into my mind immediately was that mom guilt.
Yeah.
You know, like how hard it is, that tension that we live in of feeling guilty of, okay, this is all I can do right now. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Shekea?
Yeah, I think in quotes, I feel like every time, but piggybacking a little bit off of what Michele just said, she's talking about seasons. I'm thinking about every day, right? Like I'm getting up in each moment, like, okay, your mercies are new today. I need all of it to get through this day. The quote that always speaks to me, it's actually by Jackie Hill Perry. She mentions something to the effect of, in reality, I will sometimes be a Mary, and other days I will be a Martha, but I have to remember that he's just always in the room with me.
Yeah.
So no matter how busy I may be, or no matter if it's nap time and I do have the time to sit at his feet, or if I'm sitting in the hustle and bustle and I'm working, or, trying to juggle all these things, taking a pause and remembering that he is with me, that he's intended this day for me. There's no surprise for him in this. He's already gone ahead of me. He stands behind me. He's in between all of those things, because you have to speak that to yourself sometimes to remain sane, right? Like being completely honest. And that is, I feel like, what brings me back to this is intended for me. This is my purpose. I'm in this position for a reason. And just thinking about, how do I move through that day in that season that he's called me in?
Right. That's really so good.
Yeah.
I'm a very practical person. So in thinking about this, I thought like some practicals that I do.
Great.
This is so silly. At least my son thinks it's silly. So since my kids are older, I can do this. Obviously, you can't do this with babies, but there are times of the day. Sometimes it could be 7 o'clock. Sometimes it'll be 8 or 9 o'clock. And I shut down my living room and I make it an adult space. And I said, I love you guys. Mom's tired. Dad and mommy want to hang out with each other. You can hang out in any other part of the house, but this space is for us. And we're not going to be answering any more questions unless there's an emergency. Now, my youngest always still loves to pop in here and there, but I do feel like it's that we've established those boundaries, I think, since they were like maybe 8 or 9, we started doing that. Bedtime helps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Having a bedtime always helps too. But like I have just learned to carve out timestamps for myself. There's also been times in the middle of the day where I just need a moment.
Yeah.
Mom cannot help. Give me 10 minutes and I will go to my room, or I will stand outside on the porch and just take some breathers, because I need that. I need that space so that I give my brain a moment of rest. Because that's where the struggle is, I find, like that emotional depletion and just exhaustion at times of all the talking and directing and support, while I'm also trying to work full time. And I've been blessed the last 2 years to homeschool my middle schooler.
The joy.
I do.
It is a joy.
Yes. You homeschool, but it's like finding the balance in you work too, finding that balance in like fulfilling all the roles in life. You have to have a practical plan.
You need a minute. So
like I would encourage our moms, like take a time when the kids are not around to identify what's your practical plan. What parameters, what boundaries can you put in place to get your Bible read, to get in the presence of the Lord, to get your workout on, to spend time with friends. I have a really good friend. I won't shout her out here, But she has learned she needs to put a calendar invite to get me out of the house.
That's nice.
I love it.
Because I will be like, yes, let's do that. And nothing happens. Does that happen to you?
Oh yeah, of
All the
course.
time.
Yeah.
But I'll even piggyback 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. My Alexa announces it is quiet time.
Oh, I love that.
Okay. Then on a quarterly basis, shout out to my husband, thank you. I go to a hotel. I'm not a mommy. I'm not a wife.
I love that.
They have showed up at the hotel.
Oh, no
but
way. That's
once,
so
only
funny.
once.
Like,
but
we
I just
miss you,
say,
Mom.
scheduling the time for
Right.
yourself, sometimes you just have to.
Right.
That's so good.
I love this. I love getting right. See the things we can learn from each other.
Speaking to the camera.
I'm gonna do that quarterly, Michelle. We can do that quarterly.
Even though, like,
It could
once
be a mile
year,
or two.
man.
Yeah, something is better than nothing.
Quarterly.
Thank you for shedding light on this practice.
It was either that or I was leaving.
Anika and I are going to be the ones that show up to your hotel. Like,
That is fine.
share your bed with you.
We don't have to
No,
talk.
we might have to do a ladies' weekend now. Let's get hotel rooms in the same place.
Let's do it.
I love it.
We could do a podcast from there.
There we go. I love.
It's great.
I love this. I love that we've gotten an opportunity to talk about some like the foundational truths, what God has called us to do, how He's positioned us, how we get the privilege and the blessing to pour in, to disciple our children, to nurture and teach and model all the good things that we want them to do so that they live the best, healthiest life close to the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful for that. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your journeys on that. I think at this time, let's jump into some of these questions. These are really great questions. Thank you to all the moms in our community that shared this with us. We're going to go ahead and just dive in.
Okay, great. So I am going to have the opportunity to ask a few questions about relationships as a whole in our lives and the lives of our children. So first, I will begin with, how do you talk to children about God in the different stages and the different ages of their life? So I'll get started with my first impression there. So we talked a little bit about discipleship earlier and our lifestyle really leading what we're putting down for our kids to pick up, right? So I think about, again, a quote from a book. I will paraphrase, but it just speaks to family discipleship and that the fact that it shouldn't be an add-on, but to actually be sustainable and the most effective, that it really needs to be something that is woven in. And I paraphrase that to be discipleship should be ordinary.
Right.
So thinking about what does that look like in your day-to-day, it's realizing that your lifestyle is what teaches.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily always have to be something so deep or serious as homiletics, right?
Yeah.
We do that every now and again. Like we'll sit and study our Bible, real talk. But it could be something as your toddler, you're walking down the street and you're saying, look at those beautiful clouds. Who created those?
Right.
You know, it could be the teenager thinking about, who gave the person that creativity to create that phone that you're spending so much of your time on? But it's thinking about weaving those things in and catching the moments and pointing them back to God in that. And that's how it's a natural thing. That's how it's not a cringy thing because this is who we are. This is how we live our lives. So
That's good.
That's great.
That's really good. Yeah, we, I think to add on to that, we do like a family devotion every night. That is age appropriate. It's like a kids devotion that we do together. I think so much of it is just like you said, like slowing down and getting on their level and working them through conflict and whatever is going on and kind of weaving in like, well, what would God's like, what's the truth there? What would God say about that?
I love what you both said. Like when you were talking, I thought about like not making it religious and traditional. And like, this is our life. Like this is how we live. It's not like this set aside thing that we do on Sunday or Wednesday nights or a church function. It's how we talk in our everyday living. Because sometimes I even notice with my own friends that don't go to church, just how I talk is differently. Even like, oh, that's just such a blessing, or I'll pray for you. And so that's what I've also been intentional to weave into my children's life. Like, hey, you don't have to speak differently, and you don't need to hide that you love Jesus or that you're on the worship team. Invite your friends to the youth outing. And so making it clear, like, we need God. He loves us. He's drawn you, and he's a part of your life, and don't ever hide it. My kids are a little bit older, and so I have found that in this stage of all three of their lives, they're questioning.
Yeah.
I love it. They're even doubting, and I love it. Like, I welcome it. It's not something that I freak out about, because I want them to question. I want them to explore their doubts, because they're in a place now that I'm not just reading the storybook Bible, right? Like when they're younger, we're doing those things, the stories, the fun songs. They're in a place where I'm like, Lord, may they encounter you for themselves now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like, we do all this pouring out. We bring them to church faithfully, but at a certain point in their life, they have to really identify themselves with the Lord. And so yesterday we came to church and we had a ministry moment here at church of a prophetic ministry. And that's for those of you that may not know, that's just an opportunity for the prophets of our house to just encourage and share what God is saying to the individuals that they're ministering to. And so the boys were not super excited to come. And I said, well, you guys have been baptized, you experienced this before, and I just think it'd be a great opportunity, because this is part of who God is. God gives us spiritual gifts. And so I think making sure to help our kids experience those moments is important when we can. And so we came, and I shared with our producer, Kimberly, I was like, it was great, because when we got in the car, they were like, I'm glad you made me do this. Aww. They felt encouraged. Yeah. And they got to be in the presence of the Lord and how he's gifted others. Yes. So I think that's part of the talk with our children to God, is also making sure to bring them around their community and to explore their identity and help usher them into a place where they encounter God themselves.
That's good. I love what you said there, because I wanted to also point out Deuteronomy 6, I feel like is like the parenting guide. If you know nothing else, just look there, and it's literally talk about them on the road, talk about them at home, talk about them when you first wake up, all the way until you go to sleep. So but it's literally make it natural, right? Yeah. Put the verses on the wall. You might not put them on your doorpost, but put them on the wall so that they're seeing them. But they're there. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
My next question about relationships: how do you cultivate those amongst siblings?
Ooh, I guess I will share. Because my kids are older, I think I have a house of future attorneys sometimes because of the amount of debating that goes on in our household. Oh my goodness. Great. And so for us, I think, and my husband, he's such a man of peace, my husband. I'm like the passionate, very outspoken one. He's very wise, take it slow, bring the peace to the house. And so things will be happening with the siblings. And I'm like, do you see this? Do you hear? He's like nodding his head. And then he'll just stop the boys and he reminds them, are you family?
That's so good.
Are you pleasing the Lord with how you're treating your loved one? How can I count that you're going to treat people well outside of this house and you're not caring for and loving on your own brother?
That's good.
And so I always love when he reminds them of that. I borrow it all the time because it's true. It's like, you guys have been blessed to be brothers. There's no mistake. There's no throwing you out. This is us. And I try to help them to practice their communication skills of listening, not just speaking, right? And not necessarily being of the mindset that I'm right, you're wrong. But because I have like two that are almost adults and one teenager, I'm like, you guys need to think a little bit more critically and lovingly for one another, because that's how God wants us to treat one another, not only in this house, but outside of this house. Yeah. And if we're not able to communicate in love, we're not loving each other. One of the greatest commandments that God has called us to do. So that's something, one of many things we try to speak into to cultivate their relationship.
We have two sayings. One is, the first one is a Bible verse, a brother is born to help in a time of need. And then the other one is, that's your best friend. And so
I love that.
Whenever there is challenges, because there always are, like they fight, they're going to argue. It always comes kind of back down to those two things. Like, a brother's born to help. Are you helping your brother? Are you not helping your brother? Seems like you're not. And the other one is just like reminding them, like, this is your best friend. Like this is, do you treat your best friend this way? Do you know? And so just kind of helping them, remind them of those things and bring it back to that. And then like, kind of like you said, like getting them to slow down. And a lot of times we'll kind of like replay the scenario over. Say, okay, let's try that again. What can we do different this time? You know, you were yelling, you were taking a toy, like whatever the thing is, what can we do different? And kind of just making them almost like role play that so that we can see what it looks like to do it in a way like there's going to be conflict, but maybe we could just handle it a little different next time.
That's so good.
What I think is really fascinating about both of your responses is that it was the same thread, reminders, pointing them to each other. And that was going to be similar to what I was going to say. I remind these girls, this is the only other person you're going to experience your entire life with. And also, do you treat your best friend this way?
Yes.
Come on.
You treat your sister the one that shares a room with you.
Right.
She's with you while you're sleeping.
Yes.
So it is a good reminder. And then that they really are blessed. God intentionally made you that big sister.
Yeah.
Right.
God gave you that one to pour into you, to encourage you or to challenge you so that you could learn how to do this well with your roommate 10 years from now, et cetera. So I really love that.
That's great.
That's good. You, there's one more. I just thought about this while you were both sharing. There's another key lesson in these relationships is pointing them to forgiveness.
Yes.
Because we have to practice that wherever we go for the rest of our lives.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah.
Practicing forgiveness, laying things down when it's unfair, right? And that you don't agree.
Yep.
What adults have to deal with that?
We say a lot of like, that's right, it isn't fair.
Right.
Yep, you're not wrong. We're going to push through anyways.
Exactly.
My husband makes my girls hug.
Oh, that's hard.
But it's usually like...
Don't touch me.
Yes, Dad. I will. Okay, Dad, I did it.
That's funny.
You will forgive.
I'm moving on to our next question, and it's specifically about friendships. Those people that they treat better than their own siblings sometimes. How do you, ladies, help your kids navigate the many facets of friendship, whether difficult, whether lovely? How do you help them welcome them, and how do you help them deal?
Yeah, I can think of an instance where my oldest was, I had the joy and pleasure of being a teacher's assistant in my son's first grade class last year. And I saw him starting to want to kind of follow a kid that wasn't making the best choices. And they were in first grade, so it wasn't like a big deal, but I could kind of see that sort of
adventurous kid.
And I was in the classroom, so I could see. And so I sort of just started to encourage him because I could see him doing that, and I could see him also not making some of those great decisions. So I was not disparaging at all of the other young man. Like, he's a sweet kid, and but I just started to encourage him to like spend more time with some of the other kids in his class. Like, hey, this friend over here, like he seems to have the same interests as you, whatever.
Right.
Obviously that's a pretty unique situation, but I think you can kind of encourage your kids to look at the qualities that they see in their friends and say, is that something I want to model? Is that something I want to, and kind of help direct without saying like, you can't be friends with that kid anymore.
Right.
Like, you know,
that's a great opportunity for that.
Yeah.
That's good.
What about you?
I would say, as you were talking, it made me think about how it's changed. So when they were younger, I definitely had more. I definitely took the lead on directing some of those interactions and how some of those friendships would have to come to an end at times.
Yeah.
Like those elementary school years of like your kids pursuing the cool group, the popular group, wanting to be part of in spite of not being treated very well. Now, so like laying that foundation of like, is that really a friend?
Right.
Are they really caring for you?
Yeah.
Our friends shouldn't be our friends one day and then hurtful and making fun of you another day. And so helping to just carve that out for the boys. A couple of them did much better at that than one of my sons. And so he had a really tough time. And it was really hard and painful to watch. And so for me, one of the other huge answers to that was praying.
Yes.
Because we're not there, and just praying into them having the courage and the confidence to stand up for themselves and to stand for who we've taught them that God says they are.
Yeah.
And also being able to stand alone and not have a gazillion friends sometimes and that being okay.
Yeah.
Now it's pivoted quite a bit where I'm more of an advisor.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I get to watch them make decisions and choices in their friendships and where they go and don't go. And it's been great to see even the mistakes that they've made in their friends, that they're learning for themselves. Like, what they taught me before and what they said before, it makes sense. Now I'm seeing it. We even had something happen recently with my high schooler, and he was just devastated.
Aww.
And so we prayed, and he even felt like guilt inside for falling for something. And I was like, you know who God says you are. And this is not going to be a loss. This is a lesson learned. And just helping them understand that this is how relationships are, and we learn from them.
All the time.
Yeah, right? And God uses them to now grow us and strengthen. And I said, you'll never make that decision again. I promise you. Yeah. Not this one.
I will say I love that. Again, thinking about remembering who you are, your own worth in that, and thinking about relationships. I also think about, especially when they're little, you want to get down to their level, see them eye to eye, and relate when you're trying to communicate anything to them, right?
Yes.
What works really well for my girls, and they're in that like tween, like middle school, lovely age. What works for them is me being able to relate to what they're going through. That's really good. They're always asking questions. Tell me about a time when you were a kid, Mommy. Yeah. Tell me this. So I try. God has been gracious in giving me examples that I've been able to share. You know, there might be a filter sometimes that I've gone through with my own friends, or maybe advice that my mommy gave me in this situation. And I think that resonates with them a lot more, to say, oh, I'm not the only one. Mommy did it too. And she turned out okay. Right. Decades later.
We're going to make it.
Going to make it. So I love that in terms of providing the practical things, intervening when you think is necessary, especially when they're younger, but then also providing the example and saying, we've gone through it too. And it will be okay. Just remember who's with you, even when Mommy and Daddy may not be.
Yep. Okay. So good.
So now that we've talked about all of their relationships, we have to remember that we want to try to maintain some of our own.
Yes.
So how do we do that, especially when we're juggling all of the things? How do you guys best do that?
Well, I mentioned earlier about the whole calendaring, having good friends that will calendar. But like, I think as moms, it's important that we look ahead to try to make space for it. Because if we're just going with the grind of day to day and work life, I think it's very easy to forget ourselves. I mean, sometimes I look up and I haven't even bought myself a new pair of pants or jeans, and everyone's got their Jordans, their what are their Currys? I'm trying to remember what they wear. Calvin Klein, like whatever they want. And I'm like, I got something to go. And I'm like, I have nothing. Like, why didn't I go to the store? Anyways, sorry. I'm venting a little.
Real.
It resonates.
It's just safe space.
Yeah. And so, like, we have to think about ourselves. I'm a night owl, and sometimes I'll just spend it watching TV. And of late, I've actually been trying to just like look ahead, look at my calendar, look at some, like even making lists in my journal of like things I want to do, and practically planning that out. As I mentioned earlier too, I grew up in a single parent family home, and so I just would like to share what I saw my mom doing, and I look back and I'm like, these women were so smart, genius. But there was other single moms that I called my aunts, and they would actually take turns. So like all of us, there was 3 of them, would go to one of the mom's house, and then the other 2 would go out. So I think even in single parent communities, like partnering, getting to know someone, obviously, and if you're comfortable, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sleepover. Like we would spend the night because these women were like my family, but like even just for like an hour or 2 outing, and just getting someone in your village to just come alongside you as well if you're in a single parent situation, because we all need a break. We all need support. And so, yep, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So I think we talked about this for a second, like the mom guilt can kind of kick in, and, it's like, oh, well. Oh, yeah. I can't. Like you're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to, almost. But how, like you can't pour into your own family if you're not going and getting like that community with your friends.
Okay.
And so... yeah, I think it's prioritizing it and just, communicating, especially with your husband.
Right.
Like, hey, how can we work this out in our...
So good.
I agree. Communicating with your husband, giving your own self grace, and also asking for the grace from your friends, because sometimes they don't always understand if they're not in the same situation as you.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm excited for the next question.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to move over into, we've had a few questions about children's behavior and how we can respond to their behavior.
I like that word, respond.
Yes.
Not react.
It's very good. We're all learning. So one of the things, one of the questions was, how do we have an appropriate response when asking a child to do something and they don't immediately obey? Anybody want to jump in on that, ladies?
Yeah. That's so funny. As a former constant reactor,
listen,
this is why I like the word respond. I even use it with my team here at church. Like, we need to respond well, because that was I was just a very weak area in my life, and I still have flashes of it here and there. I'm quick to apologize, but I think when we are quick to model, and not join in our children's behaviors, it goes a much longer way for long-term change.
Yeah.
I know behavior is not just about behavior. It's also a heart issue. Yeah. And so getting to the root of that has been key, an intentional tactic that we've employed with our kids. And then also trying to help them understand like what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? And do we need to forgive? Are we still holding on to the thing that happened last time? Do we need to work on patience and self-control?
But I like that because it's being honest with them. It's helping them see themselves, and then also communicating how you're seeing them. We have this saying, immediately, completely, and sweetly. If obedience is not that, it's not obedience, right?
Yes.
So thinking about how you guys mentioned reminding them, your friends, we talk about, are all these 3 components in what you just did?
Right.
What was missing?
Yeah.
How could we have done that differently? But then also recognizing we have to extend them grace, just like we're extended grace, because how many things are we responding to immediately, completely, and sweetly when the Lord is asking us to do something? So we have that same issue, right?
That's that sanctification.
Yes, there it is. But even sharing that with them, I know it's hard.
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
Yes.
Right.
Let's work on it together. How can we do this together, right?
Yeah.
But then I also, it's just looking at it and extending it to you. Sorry.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think so much of it is, I think I mentioned this earlier, and we've talked about it, is like slowing down and getting right in there. So like if your kids are little, especially, is literally getting on your knees or sitting down in front of them and looking them in the face and talking through like what you just said, like what just happened here? Like how can we change? And I think so much of parenting is checking our own hearts before we even can enter into that moment with them. I feel like so much of it is not meeting them where they are, like you said. Like if they're at a 10, you need to come in at a 1.
So don't get louder and bigger.
Right. True.
Get down smaller, get down quieter.
Diffuse the bomb.
Literally, especially when they're little. Like not my youngest, who's 3 currently. Big feels.
Oh,
they have big feels. But I think just slowing down, getting down on their level, and checking yourself.
That's good. That's good.
So this is actually related. How do you address temper tantrums and less than desirable attitudes? And we actually talked about how temper tantrums and less than desirable attitudes are not limited to toddlers.
No.
They extend all the way up. And so I think
that's the little secret we're keeping in our house. I'll be honest. No.
So how do you kind of, I think we talked about it a little bit, but maybe expounding on that a little more.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, and thinking about what is our response to them. Also reminding them, I know, this is not always the easiest thing to do. Everyone struggles with this, so they don't feel that they're alone. One of the things that we've done is we've sat and said, let's pray together through this.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not in the place, right? So I just have to do it
That's
for
key.
them, and we do it, and we take some time, and almost 10 times out of 10, they'll come back when they need, when they've had their space, and we'll say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, and things like that. But it's being able to see that and to notice that and to give them that. But also saying, anger is not always a sinful thing, like reminding them, but it's how we express our anger. Because mommy wants to flip that table sometimes when I'm upset with you. But do I do it every time? No. Do I do it every time? I've never done it, okay? It's just
do I do it every time? Well, only like a couple.
But it's just being honest and just giving them the space and allowing them to understand that it's not a problem with them. It's not an issue, and working through it.
We do a lot of in your anger, do not sin.
Yes.
And so we say, like, you can be mad. Like, it's okay for you to be mad that mommy said no or whatever, but we can't throw, or we can't hit, or we can't scream, or whatever the thing is. So that they know that there's, like you said, like, anger in it itself may not be a sin, but how you react so almost certainly may be.
I like that.
And I'll just chime in. I may know a teenager or two that
no names will be named.
A tantrum talk. Definitely an attitude talk. That attitude comes right in at 11 and a half, 12. It's like, who are you talking to?
Assess.
Do you know I'm your mother? Okay. Anyways, but I think one thing that has helped me is we've done exactly what you guys have said too, but like I also try to think about the changes, the bodily, the hormonal changes
brain development
yes,
too. Just
the brain, that frontal lobe.
Yes.
Like, please, Lord, touch it. Like, there's serious changes, physical transitions that they're going through. And so I think, like, when we talked about, like, not joining them, not matching their level, their attitude, their volume has been key. Like I said earlier, my husband is like the symbol of peace. And so I just try to channel my hubby. Okay, we're going to be at peace here. But then also just helping them to recognize, like, okay, how old are you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There should be a level of self-control that you are harnessing and you're not. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and like you said earlier, sometimes they're not even ready to hear that. Yeah. So there are moments where I'm like, have a seat.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Have a seat. We'll talk about this in 5 minutes. Yeah. Get a hold of yourself. My husband's like, I will not talk to you if you're acting like that.
Right. Let's take a
and
second.
Sometimes they want to do the talking.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like, I will not talk to you until you get it together. Yeah. Be respectful and lower your voice. And there will be no hopping. Because sometimes we see hopping.
My daughter started clapping. I'm like,
oh, yeah.
So we have one more This is a fun one. Our children's academics. School years are definitely a journey of faith. And I just am just so grateful for God's direction, because when you have any child, it's always going to look differently for everybody. Yes. It really is. I think one thing I've learned from with children's academics is not to expect any one of my children to look the same. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions that we received was, how do you discover your children's gifts in the academics, and whether or not transitioning them based on their ability to different avenues in school is something to consider?
I can start with gifts. So my first thing is pray.
Yeah.
pray, and pray.
Yeah.
That's good.
Literally asking for the Lord to reveal things to you. Make it obvious. Make it plain. Right. Show me their gifts. Show me their inclinations. Show me their talents. Show me their quirks. Like, there's things that literally are going to be different than another child. You may not know them, because this is like, when I had my first kid, I was like, do all kids do this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But God can make those things plain to you.
Yeah.
The other thing I think about is study them. One of the facets of his love is his attentiveness. He sees us, he hears us all the time. You see it woven through every story in the Bible. And so one of the facets of our loves needs to be attentiveness. Pay attention, look at them. What are the things that you keep seeing recurring? It may not be something that's so obvious where you say, oh, he's 2, he's going to be the next Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's going to be like the next artist. But you may say, oh my goodness, like my child has an inclination to always love on people.
Yeah.
As God has been revealing things to me specifically about my girls, I have been jotting them down, and I've been able to see the connection.
I love that.
Very good idea.
My oldest is she's a really great drawer. Like, my husband's an artist. She's an artist.
Wow.
But she loves to draw people. She loves history. She prefers to learn about the lives of people. Okay. So we've kind of seen so many of these things pour back always to people. So we know that she has been given a heart for people. And I think one thing that has been key for us is also telling her what we've seen, because it helps her to even communicate what she's hearing and feeling in herself to confirm. So I think it's prayer, attentiveness, and also the communication back and forth between your child at all of their ages and stages.
I think to tie in with your prophetic story as well, we've had the opportunity to have people speak over our boys. And so we've been able to remind them of those things too. And it's been so cool to see how God will bring to our memory, like, hey, remember how I told you that he said he was going to be?
Same.
And so it's been so fun and such a joy. And I think I'm just constantly reminded that, like, God loves them so much more than we ever could, which seems impossible because of how much we love them. Right. And so he's like, I've got it. Like, I've got a plan. Good. I've given them the gifts. And I love what you said, just like studying. I mean, just being able to say, and I think that's a really good idea to write it down.
I love
great.
that.
Yeah.
I really love that. I never thought of doing that.
Because I'm overwhelmed. It has to come out of
Yeah,
here.
that's a good call.
Go somewhere.
And you're
Yeah.
capturing it. That's so key. I had a thought too, just for families with neurodiverse children,
Yes.
children on the spectrum or ADHD, and just being mindful that there are giftings in all of our children.
Yes.
And be watchful. You know, sometimes like I think one of you mentioned like we're just rushing through, but we need to pause and watch our children, because that's where the guidance and the helping to lead them to harness their strengths, even though they have various abilities that are different than others, and then making an opportunity to carve out time for them to do the things that are their strengths. And sometimes that doesn't happen in school. And so I have neurodiverse kids, and so we had to find ways to either go to different venues, sign them up for different things to make sure they're getting an opportunity to enjoy the things that they are interested in and they have strengths in. So I think that's really important, which I guess leads me to the next question that we were asked. At what point do you stop fighting your kids' academic weaknesses and push them to specialize in their strengths? And I guess kind of has to do with what I was just saying, like being the person that can help identify, or like if you're at church and you get a word, like helping them to build upon those strengths. It may not be school, and that's okay. Yeah. School is necessary to learn, to get knowledge, to graduate. But I don't think every child has to, compete with like being in honors and AP and IB and that's just something like for our household. I'm not big on the standardized testing and like you have to like match this and that. I'm like, what do you love? Yes, you have to get A's and B's. That's required in my house. But what do you love? Yeah. Let's explore that. Yes. Let's build upon that for them.
Yeah, I think it's more about encouraging their giftings and reminding them of who they are.
Right.
And making sure that that's at the forefront.
Right. Yeah. I had a conversation with one of my boys, like, it's okay, you're not the best writer.
Yes.
But who could build computers? You.
Yeah.
And you learned how to do that by yourself.
Yeah.
Like, don't detract from yourself because there's a weak area when God is giving you strengths. And that's what you need to hone in on. Yeah. And I think even as adults, sometimes it's like, but I want to be great at that too. And it's like, it's okay if you're not great at it. You can master it. You can build skill level. But there are other things that you're great in. Pursue that. And so that's what I would say to parents. Pursue that. Help your children pursue what they're great in and what they love in. Not loving, what they love. I'm getting tongue twisted now. Okay, let's see. What's this final question? Sending them to an alternative school or specialized programs they're good at instead of getting tutors for persistent weak areas. Is that something to consider? And I guess this would be more for older kids, but I think it's something we could all speak into possibly. You have any thoughts, Shekea, on that?
I think this is probably piggybacking off of what we just spoke to.
Right.
But I do think it's considering how do you and your family really give the opportunity to cultivate what their gifts and talents are. So I really think it's thinking about, or it's again prayer, right? Because you're not making any decision on your own, but asking the Lord to show you, open the open doors for the opportunities, right, that are there to provide to them. Because if He's placed it in them, He's placing the situations for them to be able to walk it through. But I do think it's really honing in, like I think about, especially where we live, everything is, you got to do everything. You got to try everything.
That's what I was just saying.
And I do think there is some validity to saying they need to be exposed because how else will you know?
Yeah.
But I do know because I can ask the Lord to show me. I don't have to pay for all 28 of the sports for them to figure it out, right? So I know I'm not necessarily providing the most tangible, practical way however, the most tangible, practical way is prayer.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And really asking for revelation there. But I do think that God provides. I mean, I mentioned my oldest she loves to draw. We have her in art school.
Right. That's
Can't
great.
pay for art school anymore.
Yeah.
You gotta learn on YouTube now, but there's things there.
Yeah.
There's other resources.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. So I'm thankful for God's call, that this is not an accident, that this is purposeful, and that we have the Spirit of the Lord to harness. So thank you both so much for joining in and just sharing your hearts and sharing your journeys. I hope this has been a blessing to all of our moms. I wish you all a happy Mother's Day. Thank you for all that you do, all that you care for, and that just answering God's call on your life to pour in, to steward, to disciple, and love on these kids that are in your life. So I hope you tune in next time, and I hope you enjoyed our Mother's Day special of the Grace Parents Podcast. Have a blessed day.